Registrar of Contractors.
Great, thanks, sir. All right. So just to set some house rules, please mute yourself unless you have a question. And if you do have a question, feel free to interject or use the chat function. If you don't know the chat function in Zoom, it should be, I think it's right at the bottom of your screen. Yeah, it's at the bottom of your screen. You would just go into it, type your question, and we'll see it and be happy to answer you. Also, I just started recording. The purpose of recording the meeting is that we will email you a link to YouTube where we will upload this video to, so that you can go back and watch it. So if you have any questions or just want to refresh your memory, not everyone is applying tomorrow. A lot of people come to this education seminar with the plan to attend some or apply sometime in the future. So by all means, ask any questions you need or want, and we'll be happy to answer it. And just know that it is recorded. We started this application seminar with the intent of helping you have a complete application whenever you submit it. It saves you time, saves us time, it gets you to work more quickly. So what takeaways do we want from this morning? It's that we want you to be comfortable using the website portal whenever you apply for the license. We want you to avoid common deficiencies, like I said, common errors with the application. And we're available, so if you've looked at the application and you already know you have questions, we're happy to attempt to guide you here. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Marley. And Marley, I'm actually going to give you remote access so that you can control your own PowerPoint. You're on mute, Marley.
Okay, so I'm going to go over what the Registrar of Contractors is. So we are a state agency that licenses contractors. The main way to submit a license application to us is through our online portal, which is found on our website. So 90% of our applications are currently submitted on the portal. It's very convenient because you can access it whenever you want. It doesn't need to be during our business hours. You can go on and submit your application when it works best for you. There's instructions on the portal that guide you through the application process. And it also helps ensure that your application is complete. We do also accept applications via the mail or with an appointment, but again, most of our requests and our applications are submitted on our online portal. So the first step to using our portal is creating an account on the portal. And there's specific information that you'll need to create an account. You're going to need to give us an authorized representative. We'll need to know the authorized representative's name, date of birth. We need to know driver's license number for them.
I'll take back control. I don't know what's going on with the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now then. There we go.
Okay. And to answer your question, so we're talking about authorized representatives. No, it does not need to be an employee of the company. It's just someone that you, whoever the owner of the entity that's applying gives access to. So you're a sole proprietor and you want your wife or your husband to be able to have access to your account and submit your application for you, you could do that. But they don't need to be your employee. If you want to do everything yourself, you can be the authorized representative, or if you do have an employee that you want to designate to be the authorized representative, you would give their information. Okay. And then you also need to set up some security questions. So if you're ever locked out of your account, you can get back in through the security questions. And then while you're creating your account, we're also going to need to know some business entity information. So we need to know the type of entity. Is it an LLC, a corporation, a sole proprietorship? We need to know the name of the company or the entity. And if you're a sole proprietorship or a partnership, that would be the name that's on your government issued ID. If you're an LLC or a corporation, we need to know your AZCC file number. If you don't have this information, you can find it on AZCC's website. You'll do search for your entity, and that file number is on there. That's the information you're going to need to give us. Jay, for your question, for the purpose of the portal, it's just for this specific login, it's one authorized representative. You could set up multiple logins if you have multiple people that need to access this account. And then on your actual account for the license, you can give us multiple authorized representatives that can all make changes to the license. And then for the entity, we'll need to know an email address for the entity to be in communication with you, and then a business address and a phone number.
And Marley, I can't remember if you said this or not, but just to be clear, what we license at the Arizona Registrar of Contractors is a business entity, and that's a sole prop LLC, corporation, partnership, informal partnership. It's various things, but we are different from many other states in that we actually license a company, and then any bona fide or W-2 employee under that working for that company would not also need to be licensed. So we as a difference, we license the business, and that's why Marley's taking you through how to set up a business entity, which is at Arizona Corporation Commission.
So the portal itself is found on our website, roc.az.gov. So this is the screenshot of our website. And that very first tab next to the home button is my account. That's where you're going to go to create your portal login. And then once you have your login created, you're going to set up your entity there, and that's where you can where you can submit applications. And then once you have a license, make any changes to that license.
And Mark, I see your question is, can the business address be your residential address? Absolutely, it can be. Just know that whatever business or whatever address you do use, how's that go, Marley? What's on the website? Is it the business address? And if a residential address is the business address, it still goes on?
Yes.
Okay, just be aware of that.
Okay, so once you have your account created on the portal, you're going to fill out your application. So once your entity is connected to your account, there's a button that says new application. That's what you're going to click, and this will get you into the application. And so the first information that you're going to enter is who is the applicant. And so that, again, this is the entity type. So sole proprietor or a partnership, it's your name on your government issued ID. If you're a corporation or an LLC, it's what's listed on the Arizona Corporation Commission exactly as it's spelled on the Arizona Corporation Commission. And if you're a trust, it's exactly as it appears on a trust certificate. I saw a question about exam waivers. We'll go over that later in the presentation.
Cool.
The next step is DBA. A DBA is optional, but if you want to have one, it's you're doing business as another name that you can advertise under, and it needs to be approved by us, and so it can't be, both your entity name and your DBA can't have a scope of work that you're not licensed to do. That is in Rule Arizona Administrative Code. But if we approve your DBA, it needs to be listed on your application and on your bond. So there's fields in there where you're going to enter your DBA. And this is just a recommendation, but you can register your DBA with the Arizona Secretary of State. And you can also add a DBA anytime. If you don't do it with this first application, you can add it later on. You can remove it at any time, and you can also update it if you just want a new DBA. And that's done through a name change form, which can be found on our website.
And an example of, you can't have a DBA that doesn't match your license scope. I am a roofing contractor. I can't have Jim's Electrical as my DBA as an obvious one that would be denied.
Okay, so the next step is to figure out which license classification to apply for. So we have three kind of main types of licenses: licenses for residential work, commercial work, or dual licenses, which can do both residential and commercial. And then once you figure that out, you want to see if you want to apply for a general contracting license, a specialty license, or an engineering license. So you're going to need to identify a qualifying party. Your qualifying party is going to be the person that takes any exams and also needs to show experience for the classification that's being applied for. So every one of our licenses requires that a statutes and rules exam be taken, and then most of our licenses require a trade exam. There are a couple where experience, if you have a certain number of years of experience, that can waive the trade exam. And then we do have exam waivers, which I'll go over later. So for the experience, for the qualifying party, you want to make sure that it relates to the classification that's being applied for. So if you're applying for a specialty license, you're going to want to be specific about that specialty classification. If you're applying for one of our general contracting licenses, you're going to want to give ground up experience, new build experience. Just make sure that you read the classification that you're applying for and give experience that pertains to that, because a common deficiency is kind of giving broad general experience that doesn't relate to what's being applied for. We're also going to need to know the dates of employment, because each classification has a specific number of years of experience that are needed. We have a classification cheat sheet that will be sent out to everyone that lets you know what exams are needed and how much experience is needed. We're going to need to know the hours worked by the qualifying party, the position that they held there. We talked about detailed description that they're going to need to write out. And then we need to have at least one reference that has direct knowledge of the work that the qualifying party did. This person cannot be someone that's named on the application, but it could be a supervisor, a coworker, a client, anyone that has direct knowledge and saw them performing that work. And then experience can be either hands-on experience, a qualifying party was physically doing that trade, or managerial. So your qualifying party was managing people that were doing that trade. We're going to need to get some background information on the qualifying party, including their name, date of birth, social security number. They're going to need to submit a copy of the government issued ID. The most common ID we get is a driver's license, but a passport would work as well. We need to know their residential address, phone number, email, their title, qualifying party. But if they're also an officer or a member, that information would be entered later on in the portal. We need to know the percent of ownership if they have any. They can have 0% ownership, but if they do have ownership, you'd indicate that. And then everyone on the application needs to do a background check, including the qualifying party.
And I do know one of the bigger issues with experience is that it is often not detailed enough. So the more details you can provide, the better. If you're applying for HVAC, air conditioning, include the units that you work on, the size, if you're electrical, where and how you were installing the electrical. Obviously, general contractors, you know, talk about the type of subcontractors that you managed, the type of projects that you completed, those sorts of things. The more details, the easier it is for us to understand that you know what you're talking about and the experience is therefore behind you. So that's all I can tell you is be as detailed as possible. All right, so I know somebody asked about waivers, but before we move on, we have a question. Do all CMM members, managers also require a background check, Marley?
Yes, yes, they do.
Yes. And we'll, I think, get into that whenever we talk about people needing to be listed on the license.
Okay, so exam waivers. There are situations where one or both of the exams can be waived. So first we have in-state waivers. So if you've been named on an Arizona license before, so if you've been named on any type of Arizona contractor's license within the past 5 years as their qualifying party, The statute and rules exam can be waived. For trade exams, you need to have been on the same classification that you're applying for now within the past 5 years. If that's the case, then the trade exam can be waived. And that you need to have been their qualifying party. Just being a member or an owner or a person listed on the license doesn't count. It needs to be the qualifying party, since that's the person that's taking the exams. And then we have out-of-state waivers. So if you are named on a contractor's license in another state, the statute and rules exam cannot be waived because that's specific to Arizona's statutes and rules. That needs to be taken if you're an out-of-state applicant. But the trade exam can be waived if your qualifying party was named on a comparable license in another state within the past 5 years. And we have an out-of-state waiver form that you would fill out and send to the other state's licensing board. They would fill out the bottom half of that and send it back to us. Some states won't fill out these forms, and so you would need to give us your license number, and we will look on that state's website or contact them if you need further information. So that's how we verify out-of-state licenses. If it's not a comparable license to the one you're applying for, then the trade exam cannot be waived, but that is research that your reviewer would do when they're looking at your application. Okay. So aside from the qualifying party, there are other people that are required to be named on the application. So if you are an LLC, if you're member managed, we need all members that are listed on the LLC to be named. And if you are manager managed, we need all managers of the LLC to be named on the application. If you're not sure what type of LLC you are, typically this paperwork is filed with the Arizona Corporation Commission, so I'd reach out to them to know. And then if you're a corporation, we require all officers to be named, so president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and any other types of officers. And then any owners of at least 25% or more, and any directors. So a corporation, we need those types of people to be named on the application, along with the qualifying party. And this is required by statute, so that's 32-1122.
And Marley, a question about the statute and rules exam. Where can people find information to study for it?
Yeah, so on our website under forms, it's called PSI Candidate Bulletin, which at the end of the meeting, I'll send that link in the chat, but that has study materials. So it's on our website, but I'll also send that link out at the end of the presentation.
And I think Jesse's trying to find it now, so she'll put it in whenever she can. Yep. All right.
Okay. This does not apply to all entities, but some entities are tiered. So that means that the applicant, the entity that's applying, is owned by another entity, so a corporation or an LLC. And so we require this tiered entity chart so that we can capture the ownership that we need to. That's required by statute. So this is an example. Red Corporation is the entity that's applying, and it's owned 50-50 by another LLC and another corporation. We need to go up this chart to capture all owners of 25% or more. They would be required to be listed on the application. This can get quite complicated, so if this does apply to you, feel free to reach out to us. And we also pre-approve tiered entity charts. You would send them to our licensing department email, which will be sent out in the chat. We'll pre-approve your chart for you, go over any corrections that are needed so it doesn't hold up your application process, and you have a good chart that can be submitted with your application that's already been reviewed by us. But this is kind of an example of what we're looking for. And if there are people on here that own 25% or more, they would need to be on the application and also give us a background check and a copy of a government issued ID. So similar to the requirements for a qualifying party, for any other person that's named on the application, they need to give us their name as it's listed on a government issued ID, date of birth, social security number, government issued ID, which is most commonly a driver's license, a residential or business address, phone number and email address so we can contact them if needed, the percent of ownership, and then they also need a background check. Taryn, if you're talking about a driver's license, yes, it can be a driver's license from another state if that's where your driver's license was issued. We just check that it can't be an expired driver's license. We would check that date. Okay, so every person on the application is going to need to attest to these disclosures. So we need to know if anybody that's named on the application has been on a prior license that has been revoked or suspended. So you need to give us information about that. If anybody on the license application has received a citation for unlicensed contracting or conviction for unlicensed contracting, that would need to be disclosed. And then finally, any person on the application that has a felony conviction or pending felony charges, that would need to be disclosed. And any of these would be reviewed by your application reviewer and then our legal department. It's not an automatic denial. This information would be reviewed. We'd reach out to you if we need more information, but it is something that goes through both a licensing department review and a legal department review. So if you do have someone on your application that does have a felony conviction or a pending charge, we do require that these documents be submitted with the application. So that includes the indictment or the complaint, the court's findings or a plea agreement, a pre-sentence report, documentation of the sentence, completion of the sentence, satisfaction of restitution if this applies, and an order restoring civil rights if it applies. And then you can also submit these optional documents that if you feel they support your case, so a letter of explanation, letters of reference, any completion of programs for recovery or another relevant program, and any documents showing personal or educational achievements.
And really, we can't stress enough that a felony conviction is not an automatic denial. We have what we call a good character committee as well as a petition process. I think we'll talk about them next, but I want you to know that we actually approve felony applicants at a rate of about 88%. The 12% that we don't approve, they're typically they typically involve contracting as theft or fraud with relation to construction contracting or something. Something like that is something less likely that we would approve, but we review everything. So don't be afraid if you do have a felony, apply. Just supply us with the documents that are required and suggested, and it'll be reviewed.
Okay, so bonds tend to be a big deficiency because there's a couple things that we need with bonds. So first, there's 3 types of bonds that you can submit. A surety bond, which is you would contact a surety bond company. We have a list on our website that are able to issue these types of bonds in Arizona, and you would pay a premium to them, and they would issue this bond. And then we have a cash bond, which is where you pay the total bond amount to us, and that cash bond would be on file, or an assigned certificate of deposit, which is where you get a certificate of deposit at a bank, and we would have that on file as well. All of these are a form of consumer protection. So if one of your customers found that there's poor work done or abandonment, they could file a claim against the bond and they could be paid out a portion of the bond amount. Everyone's required to have a bond on file. There's no bond exemptions. Every one of our licenses has a bond on file. And these do need to be submitted at the time the application is submitted. So there are minimum coverage amounts that are required, and these are based on an estimated volume of work that's going to be performed in Arizona. And so this is an amount that you're estimating. We don't do any type of confirmation of this is the amount you make. You're coming up with this estimate on your own. And then that will dictate the bond amount that you need to have. The other factor in that is the classification that you're applying for. Some classifications require a higher bond.
So there's a question about where an individual can get a bond, Marley.
Yeah, so if you want to get a surety bond, either Jesse or I will send that link out that has all the bond companies in Arizona or that are licensed to issue bonds in Arizona, and you would contact them. I would recommend contacting multiple to get some quotes for them about how much that bond would cost. And then the bond company will work with you on getting that bond to us once it's completed.
And then a question about the SRE. I've passed the SRE, the Statute and Rules exam for the B2 is based on our experience from a specific book.
So there's a list of study materials for each of our exams that we'll send out. I don't know the exact study materials for the B2, but we'll send that out and you can look at that. And there's also a breakdown of what the topics of questions that will be asked on that exam.
Right.
Okay, so as we discussed, the couple of things that go into calculating your bond amount, it's your estimated volume of work and then the license type that you're applying for. And so you need to have the minimum bond amount. So if you are a residential contractor, so maybe you're applying for our B license and you estimate you're going to do less than $750,000, you need to get us a $9,000 bond to cover that license. And so in that first column, that's the license type. So you'll go to the classification you're applying for. Second column is that estimated volume. And then that third column shows you the amount you're going to need to get us. To know if you're a residential, if you're going to apply for a dual license, you'd need to add up the minimum residential amount and the minimum commercial amount to come to your total bond amount, which is what this text box over here is explaining. If you have any questions about your bond, though, feel free to call us and we can go over the specifics with you.
And annual volume is your best guess at your estimate as to how much money you're going to be contracting throughout the year. So if you believe that you're going to have $150,000 or less gross volume of money coming in through contracting, and you're a commercial general contractor, you can follow along that it'd be 5,000 is what you would need as a minimum bond. So it's your estimated guess as to how much volume you'll be contracting for within the state of Arizona.
Yes, and you can always increase or decrease your bond amount as you get more established. If you find you need a higher bond, you just need to get us a bond writer, and we would,
So the question is this chart in Arizona Revised Statute? I believe that's what you mean by ARS. It's actually in Arizona Administrative Code.
The question from Brad to include materials in this amount. Jim, I don't think the statute defines that, that you need to include your cost of materials in your annual volume.
Yeah, I think it's just the volume you're bringing in, the gross volume you're bringing in.
Okay, so if you're going to be using a surety bond, there's a specific form on our website that your bond company will need to use to create the bond. So it needs to be on this form. There's a couple of things that are going to need to be filled out on this form. So first, the bond company itself is going to assign you a bond number. They're going to need to put that bond number on the form. The full legal name of the applicant or the entity that's applying will need to be on there, along with any DBA. If you are choosing to have a DBA, that needs to be on the bond. You're going to need to list the license classification and the license description. So the classification is that number that's assigned to it, so KB2, but the description is that full title of the classification. So KB2, dual residential and small commercial. We're going to need to know the penal sums. So if you're just a commercial contractor, we just need to know the commercial amount of coverage. If you're a dual contractor, you're going to need to have the bond company break it out to how much is covering the commercial side and how much is covering the residential side. that does need to be broken out. So if there's a residential consumer that files a complaint, they only have that residential amount available, not the commercial. That's why it needs broken out by the bond company. We need to have the effective date of the bond on there, as well as the date that the bond was signed and sealed. There needs to be an authorized representative for the applicant that signs. They're going to need to sign and give their title. And then there needs to be notarized signature of the attorney in fact for the bond company, and the bond company needs to put their official seal on there. The bond companies that are on that list that we're going to send out are familiar with our process, so they should know this. But if they have any questions or if you have any questions about your bond, feel free to contact us.
And Marley, what would you say is one of the bigger mistakes with a bond?
Yes, so that forgetting to break out that penal sum amount for dual licenses is a big one. Not having the full legal name of the applicant on there, so leaving the DBA off, or sometimes people just put, if they're LLC, they put their name on there instead of the LLC name. And then for your authorized representative, forgetting to sign the bond, that's another big one.
And by penal sum, you just mean that bond amount that we were referring to earlier. So in my example of general commercial contractor, 150,000 or less, 5,000. 5,000 is what we mean by the penal sum. And so if you're doing both commercial and residential, what we would do is if you were doing the minimum of both, then we would want 5,000 plus 9,000 added together. Well, not added together. You would need to prove that you have 9,000 in residential and 5,000 in commercial on that bond. Okay.
And Jeff, I see your question about workers' comp. We'll go over what we require later on in the presentation.
We are there.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Workers' compensation. So the registrar, yeah. So the registrar, we don't regulate the specifics of workers' compensation. That is the Industrial Commission of Arizona. But we are required by statute to make sure that people that are applying or renewing a license are in compliance. And there's a couple of ways that have been given to us by the Industrial Commission for you to be in compliance. So you need to submit one of the following with your application. The first is giving us the policy number for your workers' compensation and the company that is issuing that policy. And the second is proof of self-insurance. So self-insurance, I believe, needs to be set up with the Industrial Commission of Arizona, and you would provide us that proof. And there are a couple of exemptions that have been given to us by the Industrial Commission. For example, if you're a sole proprietorship with no employees, on the portal, it will ask that question. If you meet that exemption, you would check that box. Or if you're a single member LLC with no employees, you could check that you're exempt. If you don't see an exemption that applies to you on the portal when it's asking about workers' compensation and you believe that you're exempt, I'd recommend reaching out to the Industrial Commission so they can let you know if that is the case or not, because they know the specifics of those requirements. These are just what they've given us for us to confirm you're in compliance. And so I think, Jeff, your question was about a payroll software. It sounds like you might have a specific policy number, and so that's all we need is the policy number and the company that issues that policy. And then there are additional documents that you can send if it applies to you. So if you're going to be doing any solar work, you will need to give us a solar warranty. We have an example on our website. It's just a paragraph that need to be submitted. So you need to submit that with your application. If there's a license that needs to be canceled, maybe your qualifying party currently has a license and they're just going to come over and work for you. As your qualifying party, they need to submit a license cancellation form. If there's a license that you're tied to that you want to inactivate, because you're applying, you could submit a license inactivation form to be processed while we're reviewing your application. And if your qualifying party needs to disassociate from a license that they're on as a qualifying party, they could submit that notice of disassociation at the time of the application submittal as well. So we're just going to recap over the most common deficiencies that we see. So one is that qualifying party experience not being detailed enough or not covering the scope of work that the classification is for. So having kind of irrelevant information on there, just not being detailed enough. Two are bond deficiencies, so not breaking out the penal sums, not having the applicant or the entity's name correct, and not being signed by an authorized signer. Three is forgetting to submit government issued IDs for everyone on the application. Four is testing. So either submitting testing that is too old, so exams are good for 2 years. So if you took the exam 5 years ago and you're submitting it now, unfortunately, we cannot accept that. It needs to be within 2 years. Taking the wrong exams or just not submitting any exams. And testing, if you need time to study, you're going to want to do that in advance. So I would have testing taken care of before you're applying for the license. And then background checks. So forgetting to submit background checks for everyone on the license. And background checks need to be submitted to us within 90 days of you taking them. So if you, again, took your background checks a year ago and you're just applying now, those would need to be taken again as well. We do have a specific vendor that all of our background checks need to be run through. There's a link on our website that gives you all the information you need about our background checks and where to go to take them. I think the cost is about $7.44 per person. And once you complete your background check, they're going to give you a receipt number. You will submit that copy of the receipt to us or the receipt. So you don't need to give us any, just the can do our review once we have that.
Great. And Jeff has a question, Marley. What if the scope that the scope of actual intended work encapsulates a couple of different categories or classifications that we have?
Yeah, so I would recommend looking at our general contractor's licenses, our remodeling licenses, depending on what you're doing, because those cover many scopes of work.
And you're also welcome, Jeff, to contact the licensing department. We do have, we're happy to walk you through what you can tell us what work you intend to do, and we'll tell you maybe what scopes would cover that. There's also, if you can't get there with the licensing representative, we would also have a scope review. So you would submit to us exactly what you intend to do, and then the compliance department would actually review it and tell you what scopes would be allowed to do that. I think we just posted about the scope determination request. We did, yep. Our tests offered online during COVID. I wish we had online exams. We're working in that direction, but as of right now, no. Our testing vendor does follow CDC recommendations, but we do not offer online exam proctoring at the moment.
Okay. And then there is a fee that needs to be submitted at the time of application submittal. If you're submitting on the portal, this is all spelled out for you. But there's different fees based on the classification you're applying for, and it breaks down what those fees cover. There's a non-refundable application fee. If you end up wanting to withdraw your application, maybe now is not the right time for you to apply. If we've already done our review, that application fee is non-refundable, but you would get the license fee and the recovery fund fees back. So the license fee goes towards covering the license for 2 years, and then the recovery fund assessment. If you're a residential or a dual contractor, you are paying into the recovery fund. That's another form of consumer protection for residential consumers only. If there's any poor work, abandonment, violations of statutes, they could file a complaint with us. It would go through a review with our compliance department, but ultimately they could have access to the recovery fund if that's the route the complaint goes. So those fees are being paid into by every residential and dual contractor. And
So
so
then,
the last column showing the total fee amount.
and so then basically the application fee is a one-time fee. Then every 2 years, the license fee and the recovery fund assessment would apply for renewals. And I think Jesse is working on your answer, Jessica.
Oh, and for the question to make the check out to, so if you're applying on the portal, you could pay with credit card or an electronic check, but if you do want to mail it in with a physical check, you'd make that out to the Arizona Registrar of Contractors. Okay. So once your application is submitted, the agency, so the registrar has 60 days to do a review. There's an administrative review that happens within 20 calendar days, and then a more substantive review that can happen within 40 calendar days. This is a time frame that's set out for us, but we are often much faster, especially if there's fees on an application. It's going to take 60 days for every application. A lot of them are approved much faster than that. If there are deficiencies with the application, you're going to get a formal letter letting you know what's needed, and that will be sent to you via email and a phone call from your licensing reviewer. I'd recommend being in contact with your licensing reviewer if you have any questions about what's needed, because they're handling your application, so they can help you with any deficiencies that are needed, and that's also where your deficiencies are going to go to.
Yeah, on
And
average, right as of right now, if you turn in an application today, it's going to be first reviewed next week. It's 7 days right now on average, and then on average, we're issuing licenses about 25 days. So the 20 days and 40 days are again their requirements set on the agency to process the applications within that time frame. But again, we're taking a first look at an application 7 days in and issuing about 25 days. Miss Marley.
And so once your reviewer has all the deficiencies they need, they're going to send that application for a final review. So that's where a supervisor will go through and do one final check to make sure nothing's missing, or that nothing else is needed. If it's complete, it will be approved right then and there by the supervisor. If they find something else is needed or a deficiency the reviewer missed, your reviewer will reach out to you as soon as they get those corrections back and let you know what's needed to approve and finalize the application.
Okay. I guess that was it. I
From your
didn't
reviewer,
realize it. Go for it, Marley.
oh, so I was going to say check your email for correspondence from your application reviewer, since that's one of the methods that they'll communicate with you. But then also check your email, because we're going to send a survey out about the presentation. We want your feedback. There's also going to be that YouTube link for the recording of today's presentation if you need to go back and reference anything. We're going to send out a resource sheet that gives you timeline information about testing and background checks, and also some contact information for other state agencies that you'll be interacting with as you're applying, like the Arizona Corporation Commission or the Industrial Commission. And then on our application, we ask if you attended the seminar. So if you did, please answer that question. It's just using our tracking and to help us improve this presentation.
Cool. So at this point, I want to, well, let me just, yeah. So we're happy to go back to any section to cover it again. We're also happy to answer any other questions we didn't answer throughout the presentation. So we'll open it up to you. Of course, glad to hear it was helpful. And as you're filling out the application, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help you. You can see we're not a big scary government agency. We want you to be licensed. So anything we can do to help you get there, we're happy to do it.
I'm glad to hear that about one of our reps. It's great to hear.
Yeah. What is the handyman role? I wish it was a title that I could just end. So we don't actually have a handyman role in the state of Arizona. What we have is a statute that does not apply to contracting work under $1,000 with exceptions. So you're asking about ARS 32-1121 A17. And what it deals with is you are not required to be licensed by the registrar of contractors if you're performing work that is under 1,000, and that includes labor and materials, and it does not include electrical, plumbing, is minor in nature, and does not require a permit, a building permit. So if any of those things are not true, a license is required. So if it is over 1,000 with labor and material, if a building permit is required, if it is not of minor in nature, all of those things knock it into a license is required. So that would be my best and quickest answer to the quote unquote hated titled handyman role. And just to explain why I hate it, I'm from Ohio, so a handyman in Ohio, I mean, basically a handyman can repair anything in a house, and that's why it doesn't apply well for out of towners. But in Arizona, a lot of people call it a handyman role or exemption. Okay, of course. Right. Any other questions that we can help with? Any tips on getting better responses from PSI? So they do have two phone numbers. I think Marley just posted the phone number that is dedicated for the registrar of contractors. Um, I am I am unfortunately we're hearing a lot of that, Leanna. Though I can tell you we're hearing some complaints from them, and I guess if you're having trouble, feel free to reach out to licensing, and we can make a contact to PSI on your behalf.
Yeah, Leanne, I'll give everyone my email, and if you have issues getting a hold of PSI, let me know, and then I can escalate that to the supervisor there. Uh, HK, if you are installing mobile homes, um, and if it's residential, our B license could do it, or other general dual licenses could do it. Um, if you're doing repairs on mobile homes, a license would be required as well. If you have anything more specific than that, you can do scope requests with us, but then also reach out to the Department of Housing to see if they have any other requirements for mobile homes that we don't regulate.
Sure. So I guess I don't want to skip ahead, but I'll take Jesus's question if you guys want to look to see. I think Brad had one as well. Um, so Jesus, the NASCLA exam is a nationally accepted exam in certain states. So that's the biggest difference is that obviously our exam is only accepted in our state. It is cheaper, but then the NASCLA is it depends on what states you may be interested in expanding your business into, but that might be a better test for you to take, and then that would just be a business decision on your part. It is more expensive, but it's accepted in more states than just Arizona.
I think Brad, for your question, some states I know do like journeyman level licenses. We just have an electrical license, like you said, the CR11. We don't pre-approve waivers, but if you have an electrical license in another state, I'd recommend submitting that out-of-state waiver with your application. We do try to approve as many of those as we can, so your reviewer would just confirm if it's comparable. Um, it sounds like maybe you have a license in California and they are quite similar to us, and we're used to reviewing their waivers. So just get that waiver in, and we'll see if it's comparable.
Yeah, and there are certain states in the Southwest that we all developed our licensing laws about the same time and the classifications about the same time. So there are a lot of similarities between California, for example, and Arizona's licensing. Um, yep. No kidding. Good luck to everyone. We hope to. So we also have a new licensee forum that is offered the month after you become licensed, and that there we'll be happy to tell you how to avoid running into trouble with the license that you just received. So hopefully we'll see all of you in there. If you do have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to us. I think Jesse's been posting our contact information throughout. We're happy to answer any questions, as you can see. Cool. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank you again for attending. Um, Feel free to reach out to me or Marley or Jesse. Good luck to everyone, and hopefully we'll get you licensed before too long. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.